Well, coming up on today's show, some big news about Electrify America, the Audi e-tron hitting its production stride, and a new battery contract that I know of with Volkswagen. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to EV News Daily. It's Friday, the 5th of October, 2018. It's Martyn Lee here, and I've been through every EV story today, so you don't have to. Thank you to myev.com for helping make this show. Have you checked them out yet? If you're in North America and you're thinking about buying a used car, or selling a used car, or maybe learning and researching about one, that's the place you can go, myev.com. Hello to Sebastian. Sebastian McCarthy-Mora is the latest person to become an executive producer of this show. And Sebastian, thank you for signing up on Patreon and helping spread the word about EVs. Your help is greatly appreciated. We'll start with a happy tweet today from Lasse Edvardsen. His first name is Lasse. Would I say Lasse or Lasse? Anyway, he's tweeted me today, the Tesla Model X was the most sold car in Norway last month. Not the most sold EV, although of course it was. It was the most sold car. Now obviously Norway is not the world's biggest car market, but holy moly, of any kind, 47.7% of all car sales, pure EVs. A new record in Norway. And worldwide as well, he says. Thank you very much for tweeting me that. Always love to get happy tweets. If you want to send me a happy tweet, something that you've spotted from the world of EVs, just CC me in on the end, or make sure you put at EV News Daily so I can see it, and I'll read out your happy tweets. Well, Electrify America today announced its next $200 million worth of investment in Zero Emission Vehicle infrastructure, as well as some education and awareness in California, outlined in its what they call their Cycle 2 California Investment Plan. Catchy, right? It's been submitted to the California Air Resources Board. Now, Cycle 2 is going to take just over 2 years. It's a 30-month investment period, and it starts next July. The investment, which was announced today for $200 million, is the next stage of Electrify America's priorities to expand into new areas where the need for EV charging stations and the technology are greatest or most likely to be used regularly. And that makes sense. Nobody wants to see chargers not used. Of course, nobody wants to turn up to a charger and to see it used. That is the funny dichotomy of the whole situation. But nobody wants chargers sitting there for hours on end not being used. It's a resource. They need to be pumping electricity. Well, the first thing is going to be in metropolitan areas. The plan for the metro areas is the central focus being on EV charging infrastructure for more DC fast charging stations where EVs can charge most often. DC fast charging stations are going to be placed in retail locations and also where they consider the need to be the greatest if you put them adjacent, they say, to multi-unit dwellings where level 2 charging is challenging. It's going to be used the most. On highways and regional routes, this new investment announced today is going to build out the DC fast charging stations, but the ones that do 350 kilowatts. And a reminder, by the way, with Electrify America, that whenever they install those highway routes and regional routes, you're going to get both DC fast charging on CCS and also CHAdeMO as well, which is not the case here in Europe. Residential charging is part of the plan as well. EV drivers conduct 80% of their charging at home, says Electrify America, after doing a survey. And they're going to develop a new online tool. This online tool is going to promote and connect EV buyers with a range of charging incentives if they're available in your area. Electrify America will also offer a no money down residential charger and the installation. What that does enable buyers who can't or choose not to pay for level 2 charging at home to have that platform, and then the cost of installation will be incorporated into a monthly fee that gets paid back. Electrify America is going to develop a platform to allow drivers with a home charger to also earn financial rewards for plugging in and supporting demand response platforms for grid electric power stability. And if you're new to the podcast, by the way, then that's the hard thing about this podcast. Sorry for this slight tangent. I try and keep it as simple as possible for anyone who's EV curious, who's coming in and listening to it for the first time. But equally, then you get a sentence like that, and it's like, okay, a lot of people listening now know exactly what that means, but I'll spend 30 seconds explaining. The reason why Electrify America wanted to develop a platform for your home chargers, your level 2 home chargers for your EV, to get a reward for plugging in, for supporting demand response platforms with the grid. So you have to build a power grid for the peak. So you have to build out a power grid, which is enormously expensive, by the way, high voltage power grids, like crazy expensive to get your head around for the peak, which is normally 5 to 7 p.m. or maybe 4:30 to 7:30 when people get home. They are cooking, heating, lighting, sometimes cooling, sometimes heating going on, because you can't have brownouts and blackouts. So you have to build a grid for that, but at all other times, particularly overnight, well then they've just got huge parts of the grid which are being underused, but they've put all that capital expenditure in. Now, EVs, although this is an electric car podcast, you kind of do have to be a little bit interested in how you charge your car. If everybody got home at 5 o'clock and charged their car, that would be a disaster, but of course nobody will. If everybody turned up at the gas station at 5 o'clock to put fuel in their car, every single car in America turned up at the gas station at 5 p.m. every single day, there would be chaos. But nobody does. And nobody does charge at exactly the same time. That's the fear that those who want to spread the FUDsters as we call them, that's what they say. So, what Electrify America say they want to do is build a platform that means that there can be some demand response cleverness, some smart charging built in there, which can be actually, the grid is getting busier. Do you need to charge your car? Do you want to opt into this event? Maybe you get a little text saying, can we switch off your car charging for an hour because the grid is busy? Or maybe you agree to charge overnight for a lower rate. All those kind of things to make EV smart charging a possibility. I'll put a link to the Electrify America press release, which is way long, by the way. It goes into all sorts of things like education, renewable power at their charging stations, all that kind of stuff. I'll put a link in the show notes. Well, fuel prices reached a 4-year high last month, concentrating consumers' minds on the relative costs of internal combustion engines versus EVs. Now, for companies preparing to bring a record number of EVs to the market next year, oil's rally could increase demand, according to Business Standard. Well, crude oil has gone up 27% in this year alone to more than $85 a barrel. Major traders, they're predicting $100 a barrel this winter. And as US sanctions of Iranian exports are really straining global supply. The rally has started to feed through to pumps and the prices that you pay. Not you, I'm imagining, but many people. In the US, the average gas price on the verge of breaking through $3 a gallon. And as we see in these price events, it doesn't go down again. The prices go up, they rarely go down. For the first time since 2014, and it could just keep on going up from that. Utilities are pouring money into charging networks, anticipating the technology is going to catch on. Is it Enel or ENEL? In Italy, Vattenfall in the Nordic region, Centrica in the UK, all building up their systems to recharge car batteries, even before it's obvious that there's a clear business plan in there as well. I'll put a link to that Business Standard article in the show notes. Well, Patrick Danau is the managing director of Audi in Brussels, and he's been saying that by the end of the year, the Audi e-tron Quattro, which was recently unveiled, is going to be produced at their full capacity by the start of next year. He says this, and I quote, "We believe that by the end of this year, we'll reach our maximum capacity. You have to bear in mind not only the company has to ramp up, but also has different suppliers. They have to train their people, start their own new facilities, and bring them up to the same speed that we're giving according to the plan. That's the challenge for all of us." End quote. Well, the French analyst InnoVev predicts the volume for the Audi e-tron when it's running at absolute max capacity will be 20,000 a year. LG Chem's in the news today. Of course, that's the company that supplies already many batteries to EVs. They're going to be supplying a Volkswagen contract from late 2019. South Korea's LG Chem said today it's got a new secure order to supply EV batteries for Volkswagen starting late next year. According to Reuters, it didn't disclose the size of the deal. The volume and the prices of the batteries, though, will be subject to change depending on how many they order from VW and the market conditions. Thomas Ulbrich is the member of VW's brand board of management for e-mobility, and he's been saying this, and I quote, "As early as 2020, we intend to sell 150,000 e-cars a year, of which 100,000 will be the ID and the ID SUV. Speeding up the shift to e-mobility will help us meet the extremely ambitious CO2 targets that have been set in Europe, China and USA. End quote. And, excuse me, and if you want to hear more about those ambitious targets, particularly in Europe, listen to yesterday's podcast, unless you are one of faint of heart when it comes to politics, politicians, parliaments and constitutions, in which case give yesterday a miss, because it got a little bit deep. But I had some lovely comments, by the way, on YouTube and on email from people going, I don't mind. And that's why I went with it yesterday, did a good 10 or 15 minutes on European politics, because I figure that you are intelligent enough to understand what I'm talking about. It was just a bit of a risk that, hang on, you tuning in for car news and I'm going on about regulations, which is enormously important. But I think if you don't, you don't underestimate people in many cases, then you just got to go with what you think is right. And hopefully yesterday it did do it for you. Well, sticking with this story about LG Chem and Volkswagen, they formed a bi-weekly task force, they say, with LG Chem to ensure the security of VW's supply chain for EV batteries. According to Auto News, ahead of the series production starting for its first EV model, the Golf-sized ID compact hatchback, which in some circles is being called the Neo. Now, I'm trying to work out, is Neo the working name for it, the internal code name, or is that going to be consumer-facing name? Nobody can quite tell me. It was one German newspaper article called it the Neo, and it seems to have caught on. But is that going to be customer-facing? Nobody quite knows at the moment. Speeding up the shift to e-mobility is one of the things that is on their minds at the moment at VW, and that platform is going to be key to it. So, that Golf-sized hatchback is out, I think, end of next year, maybe even November, if we're going to stick our finger in the air and see which way the wind is blowing. I think November is what we'll aim for next year. They said that they're going to be meeting with their counterparts at LG Chem, the highest-ranking EV officials in VW and their equivalents at LG Chem in Poland, to discuss progress and solve potential problems that may arise. And that is only going to be, bi-weekly? Well, look, Elon was sleeping at factories for a time, and he got a lot of stick for that. And all of a sudden, they have to form a task force. It's not so easy when you're doing it yourself, is it? It's interesting. This isn't VW bashing. This is fantastic that they're getting in on the act. But a lot of words were said about Tesla over the last 10 years from people from the outside looking in. You know, it always makes me think it's always easy to tell other people how to win the game that you're watching when you are looking on from the stands. When you're on the pitch and playing it yourself, it's a different matter, isn't it? Well, VW are going down the route of a specific platform for EVs, and that's different to other automakers. The MEB platform has two major unique selling points, they say. Firstly, it's not a compromise. VW's take on it is that because you can't put a combustion engine inside it, it's not a compromise. It's a modular assembly matrix, they call it, designed only for pure EVs, no hybrids here, which enables Volkswagen to utilise the tech, they say, to maximum effect. Secondly, they say, the concept and design is structured in a more flexible way, and so the spectrum EVs that you can put on this platform goes from like compact cars, SUVs, MPVs, and that is going to give VW the economy of scale that they need to work to, because they make a crazy amount of cars. It's 6 million cars a year they make. Is it 5 or 6 million cars that they make? All the fossil cars. And the bigger volume, the cheaper they can make them, and more affordable. And if you compare that to, say, Daimler with the Mercedes-Benz cars, which they are making in a way that when it comes down the production line, you can do like a day of EV drivetrains and a day of diesels, or maybe even, I don't know how their factories work, but maybe car by car, you put the drivetrain in that's been ordered. So it seems kind of crazy to do it like that, but maybe, I don't know how Mercedes-Benz make their cars. But yeah, they're making a car that can take engines, hybrids, pure EVs. That's their take on it. And nobody knows the right way to do it yet. And it might be everyone's right way, might be the right way for them, but very different ways of doing it. Final story today, and friends of the podcast, Avid Technology, have won 6 new electronics and motor contracts. According to Charged EVs, the motor specialist that is Avid Technology here in the UK, has recently won several new contracts totalling $50 million a year. The largest contract is a £34 million deal to develop an integrated EV system for what they call a Tier 1 automotive supplier. And that's all we know. Others include a £3.5 million contract to develop and supply customised electric cooling pumps, and a 5-year, £5 million deal to provide 48-volt electrification products for a supercar manufacturer. But again, we're not allowed to know who they are. Ryan Morn is the MD of Avid Technology. He says this, and I quote, "Innovation is at the heart of what we do. We've been developing powertrain technology for electric and hybrid vehicles for over 12 years, and we're now seeing the market take off in a huge way," end quote. So often, as we told you about recently with the innovative Audi wing mirrors that aren't wing mirrors, they're little stubby cameras that stick out, and the company that developed those, a Spanish company, we're taking some credit for that online and putting out their own news to say, hey, it got all the press about the little cameras that replaced the wing mirrors. That's us! And so you'd be surprised how many different bits of these EVs, which really big car makers are putting together, which they're buying in. And it's fantastic to have a company like Avid Technology, which is growing and such an expert in their field. Here in the UK, obviously very proud of that technology. Wouldn't it be nice if you could hear more from Ryan Morn himself, the MD, the man behind it? Well, you can. Firstly, on this podcast, we talked to him a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago now, actually. If you go to the blog at evnewsdaily.com, a little search box that I've put top right, if you were to search, say, for the word Avid, you would find that Saturday special we did a little while ago. But even better than that, Ryan has his own podcast with Avid Technology, and it's highly recommended from me. You learn a huge amount about EVs, and you can, I think it's actually called the Avid Learning Podcast. Let me open iTunes in here. So I subscribe to it, and let me just check here. Yeah, the Avid Learning Podcast. If you search Avid Learning EV Technology, then you can subscribe to it. There's been 14 episodes so far. The most recent one was with Dr. Colin Heron, a total expert, an authority here in the UK, and actually worldwide, in terms of his consulting on EV charging infrastructure. But there's ones on there on battery management and all sorts of things. So please do subscribe to Ryan's and Avid Technologies, because you actually get to hear from the managing director of the company, which is just fascinating to get that insight. And congratulations to them, the company that build the bits that go inside the car that often you'll never get to find out about. Well, thank you very much to everybody that's been answering our question of the week this week. A couple more days to get in on this one. We always set it on a Sunday and give your answers on a Sunday. And this is Friday's show, so a couple of days to go. It's a simple one this week. Plug-in hybrid or pure EV? What and why and where and how? What's your opinion? Plug-in hybrid or pure EV? Thank you very much to the 88 patrons. Is that right, or 89? Thank you very much. Anyway, if you support the show on patreon.com/evnewsdaily, there are 255 episodes online of this show for free. Yeah, you can use that as a free resource anytime you want to. Check out the blog, check out the socials, search EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow.